Good morning, everyone, to today's session. Today, we are talking about moving more for your mental health, and obviously it's in relation to Mental Health Awareness Week, which is next week. So we're nice and early preparing you guys for what's to come next week. Of course, we are joined by our host, Leanne. Leanne, how are you today?
Hi, Becca. I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Yes, I'm good, thank you. Before we dive into our expert guest, Leanne, do you want to just give a quick overview of who we are at the One Group?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know who we are, the One Group is a recruitment consultancy, and we have offices in Cambridgeshire, Peterborough, Northamptonshire, and Hertfordshire. And we cover loads of different areas within the workplace: accountancy and finance, HR, marketing, office support, technical engineering, IT, and scientific. So if you are looking to recruit for your teams, or you're looking for that next step in your career, please reach out to us and get in touch, and we'll be happy to help you.
Awesome. Thanks, Leanne. So on to our expert guests. We are very lucky today to be joined by Clare Harris from Promote Mental Health. Clare, how are you this morning?
I'm really good, thank you.
Good. And we also have Neil Marsh from Neil Marsh Health and Fitness. Neil, how are you today?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Good, awesome. So, of course, we're diving in to talk about moving more for mental health. But just before we start, just obviously anyone that is watching today, please, if you've got any comments, questions, or anything you'd like to know, drop them in the comments box and we'll be able to answer them throughout this session and after the session as well. But without further ado, let's dive straight into you guys. So, Claire, would you like to go first to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Clare Harris from Promote Mental Health. I'm a health psychologist. I've worked in mental health for about 24 years. At Promote Mental Health, we offer training and consultancy to workplaces and organisations, helping them to upskill their staff, so have more knowledge, confidence and skills around mental health so they can look after themselves and other people. So we offer training around mental health first aid and bespoke training to meet the needs of the organisation.
Awesome, thank you. And on to you, Neil.
Hello, I'm Neil Marsh, and I've been working in the fitness industry since 2007. Initially started off in gyms and in a conventional career of working for someone else. And then I decided to open a gym on the basis that I wanted to pay forward everything that I'd learned and to get actual results, because people matter and the results that they get actually count towards their whole lifestyle and their whole holistic approach towards their life. Rather than just being based on a direct debit figure that a company wants at the end of every month. So that was why I decided to go into my own field of owning my own gym. And then from there, it's a functional fitness gym, which is what we created, where it's all instructor led, where we help people work on their functionality as well as their sport and their fitness goals for whatever it is they want to achieve, whether that be half marathons, just staying fit and healthy, or a more specific sport.
Love it. You've both got, I think, quite inspirational stories, especially because they're both personal to you both as well. Okay, so we're going to pop these slides up. So Claire, if we hand over to you, if you want to dive straight in.
Lovely. Okay, so as Becca mentioned, we have come together for this session as it's Mental Health Awareness Week next week. The theme of that is moving more for mental health. So what we're going to cover in the session today, just a quick overview, setting the scene, a little bit about mental health in the workplace, because it's fundamental to everything we do and particularly so important in the workplace. And workplaces are getting more of an idea of having to support their staff around mental health and wellbeing. It's an issue of kind of safety and productivity. We're going to talk about the ins and outs of moving more for your mental health, the science behind it as well, but also addressing those barriers. So we know it's good for us, but why don't we do it? So what are the barriers to exercising and moving more? And a bit of personal insights on how it's helped Neil and I as well in terms of our mental wellbeing, and a bit of Q&A at the end. But we want it to be interactive, so please pop questions in the chat. We've got a few questions for the group as well, just to as we go through. So do join us and comment in the chat as well. As we said, Mental Health Awareness Week next week, 13th to the 19th of May. You will notice on socials there'll be a lot of information about what people are doing. And the key hashtag for this is moments for movement. So the idea is, how can we find small moments next week, or ongoing, not just next week, to add movement into our daily lives, to just get moving a little bit more. You've got a little statistic there. So 36% of the UK adults find it challenging to find time for physical activity. I imagine it's much higher than that as well. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. So this is a little bit about the workplace. workplaces now realise that it's really important to be looking at mental health. So mental health affects everything that we're doing. It affects our feelings, thoughts, behaviour, our communication. And we're seeing a lot more incidents of mental ill health following the pandemic as well. We've also got hybrid working, so that's having an impact on wellbeing. So Neil and I are just going to kind of talk around some of these stats. The first one there, mental health is the top reason for long-term sickness absence. So it used to be musculoskeletal. Mental health overtook this quite a few years ago. So we know it's a really big issue in the workplace. So I don't know, interesting to see if people are finding that in their workplaces. We know that 1 in 6 people will experience stress, depression and anxiety in a year in the workplace. But actually, that only represents those people that are talking about it and feel happy talking about it at work. So it may be that result is much higher. Depends on your workplace culture as to whether people feel happy to have a conversation or to explain why they're struggling a little bit, or to even give that reason for being off work. So I saw a GP probably 10, 15 years ago now to be signed off with anxiety. And the GP asked me what I wanted written on my sick note. I was like, well, I'm off with anxiety, so I'd like you to write anxiety. But he was giving me the choice about what I presented to the workplace. So quite an interesting distinction there. Yeah. Neil, do you want to pick out a couple of other of those to talk about?
Yeah. So if we look at like the cost to a business, say, of someone being off sick, and then you look at this idea that businesses need to provide mental awareness and mental well-being for their staff, I think something that I would say is people are the biggest asset, which obviously we've got there on the slide, and they're your biggest asset. So if you don't look after them and they can't function properly, then that cost there, bottom left, that's just going to increase and increase and increase, because this will just get worse. And I think, like we would say, a dog's not just for Christmas. Mental health awareness isn't just for next week. It's for every day. And for a lot of us, myself included, this is an ongoing battle all the time. This isn't cured. It's not over. And that will be the same for people with a huge team of employees as well. And it is really important that that's taken seriously in the workplace. And being from not a corporate background, being in the fitness industry, what I see, and this might just be my opinion, but there's a lot of box ticking go on for this, that people look after, businesses look after their employees' mental health and their mental state of mind in the workplace and outside of it. But, how much of it is box ticking and how much of it is actual proactiveness? So, for example, something that I talked about on here is like just making people walk a little bit further to get a drink from the further water station, if there is one, or take the stairs at the office. Are businesses just putting up a poster to say that, or are they actually like incentivizing it in terms of like workplace morale, who does it the most, or could you score it, or something like that? And I think the idea of people being the biggest asset is, without people you can't do anything. So if they're all off sick, there's going to be a big problem. And physical activity can be a massive asset in that, and it's an underused tool, in my opinion. It's underutilized and could be the solution, in my opinion. Yeah,
I think you're right, though. I think so obviously I go into a lot of businesses to deliver training, and if workplaces haven't got a kind of overarching view of well-being and how it fits together, particularly with the physical health and the mental health together, it does end up being tick box. If we're just doing something for Mental Health Awareness Week and we've done well-being, you haven't. It's not, it's much bigger than that, and it's more than that. And like you said, I love that idea of incentivizing people walking further. Let's make it into a competition to see who can get a number of steps in or number of flights of stairs and things, and incentivize that. So I think workplaces have got a duty of care, and I think they're realizing now, we haven't got legal requirements around that yet, like some of the physical health stuff. But like you said, if we're not looking after our staff, they're not going to function well. They're going to go off sick. Productivity is going to go down, and we're not going to retain staff. So it's so important.
So do you guys have any practical tips for anyone watching that would like to incorporate some more movement into their workplace for their employees?
Yeah, I mean, there's the one that I kind of highlighted there. It's really simple. Something like go into, if there's more than one toilet in your building, for the sake of an extra minute or two, could you go to the further one away? That would give the mind a rest from the screen or whatever it is you're doing. And that might mean that you get a few more steps in. And then that has been shown to show that you will sit down and be able to engage again and be more focused. Therefore, the productivity of the work goes up. The employee has had a break from their workstation and therefore perhaps seen something else, maybe even walk past a different colleague. And after a few times, they then start talking to them more. And there's more morale amongst the staff. So things like toilets and drink stations and kitchens and things like that, they can be good variables. And, you know, we talk about physical activity and we talk about exercise. They're not the same thing, but they do the same thing. You know, physical activity is really important. And just because you're at a desk doesn't mean you can't have physical activity in your day. Also, I appreciate different people listening and watching this will see there's different requirements for your business, but within a day, there will be periods where you're not glued to that 1 hour meeting. So within those times when you're just working, could there be a 20-minute rule? And every 20 minutes, you have to stand up and down 10 times in your chair, or you have to walk around the office and say hello to someone that you haven't spoken to that day. You know, things like that. It increases activity, it increases morale. And that just switches the mind just for a second, and the blood pumps, and then we feel uplifted, and then we go again, and then we're back to work.
I actually really love that. Go and speak to somebody that you haven't already spoken to that day. Yeah, that's really nice.
I think it's nice. I was thinking as well, as we talked before about kind of walking meetings. So do you have to have your meeting at a desk? You know, can you have a little wander if it's just the two of you? Also, the workplace culture kind of modelling of behaviours. So, you know, people within the workplace, if everyone's sat at their desk eating their lunch, everyone else is going to kind of copy and model that behaviour, particularly managers and senior managers. So there's that almost that responsibility for, you know, what are they modelling? Can they get out? Are they having lunch breaks? Are they moving? Are they having walking meetings? So it's that modelling of behaviour as well is really important.
Yeah.
And with that, Claire, there's an example. One of my coaches, Carol, who works for me, she comes from a very corporate background.
Okay.
And she's now gone into this industry, and she would talk about these long meetings, you know, where there'd be like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And to start with, they found it really annoying that she would stand up. But, you know, just in an intro, you know, in an intro of a meeting, a senior manager can say, look, during this meeting, feel free to stand up and move around the room.
Yeah.
You know, don't feel like you have to be in a classroom setting, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And just little things like that can increase physical activity during your day.
Yeah.
And make a real difference. So I think that's quite a good practical one that I've heard lots of stories about, that is frowned upon. Yeah. So let's remove that barrier.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
Go from there.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, sat in a 4 or 5 hour meeting, we're not going to be productive if no one's moving around, are we? I mean, I often say that if I'm doing online training, we'll take breaks and I'll say, please move away from your computer, move around, because we're not going to be productive. We're not going to function properly if we've not got some of that movement in there. Brilliant. I shall move on to the next slide. Let's have a look. This, I think, was really relevant to the workplace. And Neil and I've got kind of different perspectives on this. So for me, this shows the kind of stress level related to level of performance. So we've got our classic bell curve, that area where we've not got enough to do. If we're a little bit bored, we're not going to perform well because we're not motivated enough. That goes up a little bit. We get a little bit more stress. We may get sort of tired. We've got kind of optimum levels where we're going to perform well. We learn when we're pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones a little bit. So kind of coming up to the top of that. But if we get our stress level is kind of too much for too long, that's going to burn us out at some point. So we're going to start going over the top of that curve. We're going to get exhausted. That peak performance is going to come down. So with an increase in ongoing stress level, performance level in terms of workloads is going to come down. And then we may well hit that burnout point as well. Once we hit that level where, you know, we're burning out, we're off work or we're struggling, it's much harder to move back up the curve. If we can recognize sort of triggers or signs that we're coming up to that top of the curve and we can manage our stress levels and balance, that's much easier than if we hit that kind of burnout and breakdown stage to bring ourselves back. It's much harder to support people once they've gone off work as well.
Do you know what the common triggers and signs are when they get into that sort of
Yeah, I think in the workplace, what we're looking out for is really a sort of change in behaviour. So if we know our colleagues really well, if particularly people we're working with or managing, maybe more withdrawn, perhaps not meeting deadlines, perhaps not getting things in on time, not performing at their normal level. It's very individual. But if we know that person well, we can look out for kind of a change in behaviour. It's really easy in hindsight. All of us have ended up towards that burnout end, and you look back and go, actually, I haven't been sleeping very well. I've been rushing around too much. I haven't been looking after my diet. I haven't been exercising. Those are the things that first go when we're stressed. And then we look back going, of course I've ended up here. So it's really easy to kind of spot those in hindsight, but we need to sort of kind of learn our own triggers as well. And then there's another way of looking at this in relation to sort of physical activity, which Neil and I spoke about the other day. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think if you apply, let's go with physical activity to this and use the same terms that we see there on the bell curve. So, if you are very inactive or very active, the result of how you then feel is going to be representative of that. So if you're very inactive, you could see an increase in fatigue. And with that increase in fatigue, you could then find yourself in a state of anxiety, panic, anger, stress, because you're not being stimulated. So if you take it away from the performance side and just think about it as activity, a lack of activity is likely to increase anxiety. If you might have more time to think, is a more practical example looking at it. You might have more, if you're inactive and you're not stimulating your brain through exercise or movement, then you might find yourself in a state of anxiety more often. There are lots and lots of stats that we could pull out. But instead of boring you with those, I would say, think about fatigue as well. How often have you everyone's been out for a drink at some point in their life, I'm sure. And then the next day you have a bit of a hangover and you've got no energy. You then, as a result of that, can have maybe the rest of that day or a day after in that same state. And that's just a result of that state that you're in. Now, I know there's physical things involved in that, but the same with movement. If you're not moving, that's going to create low energy continually over and over again, and you'll feel fatigued. And you'll feel mentally fatigued as well as physically fatigued. And then if you have moments of anxiety, Claire, we spoke about it. How many times can you go for a walk and that can just change it? Just a walk just changes that state. And I think when you look at this performance bell curve and movement, they're very commonly closely linked in terms of increased activity or lack of activity. And you don't want to create fatigue because you're inactive, because you will.
Yeah. And that kind of links into that lack of motivation, doesn't it? If we're inactive, there's lack of motivation to perform and to exercise. And we were just saying before, weren't we? You never feel bad after a workout. If you can get yourself there and you do it, you feel great afterwards. And you think, why didn't I do this before? Why am I not doing it so often? It's just that motivation and getting over those barriers that are stopping you from doing it in the first place.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or advice on how to overcome those barriers so people then don't think, I can't be bothered to do that walk, I'll do it tomorrow? Because, like Claire said, you never regret a workout or a walk that you've just done, but you might regret not doing it had you had the chance.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we need to ask ourselves is what is it that we like to do? And I think we'll talk about this in a little bit as well, but what is it that you like to do, or what can fit in with what you need? But effectively, there's always going to be somebody who is just like you that might be able to fit more physical activity into their day. And you got to ask yourself, why is that? What are they doing different to me? And it could be simple things like a 10-minute walk lunch. You're out for a walking lunch, and those 10 minutes that you're walking just are the difference between the rest of your day and not doing it. The difference in your afternoon just for 10 minutes could be huge. And the question is what's the end result that you're looking for? Because if the end result isn't representative of you're not getting it with the actions you're taking now, you need to change that. And activity can be a real stimulus for changing mindset and everything. As we say, you go out for a walk and a chat, to be honest, the physical bit is irrelevant of what you actually get out of it. It's good for you, but actually the outside fresh air, sunlight, all of those things are massive for that as well. So, or it might be even the conversation you have with the colleague or friend that you're doing it with. But the physical activity can be the facilitator to a better day.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, I was procrastinating over writing some of this the other week, and I thought, I just don't know how to put some of the slides together. Literally went for a 10-minute walk, and I came back with this wonderful idea for the next couple of slides. Literally just changing location, like Neil said, sunlight, bit of exercise, getting outside, completely different perspective on things. And we'll come on to some of those barriers, I think, in a minute as well. So thanks, Neil. This one was just kind of put in the context of movement, physical activity and exercise. So on the right-hand side, we've got the recommendations for adults in terms of exercise. Anyone who's watching, we've got a little question there. So how many times a week do you exercise? If you want to put that in comments, that would be great. And so I think we've got at least 150 minutes moderate intensity per week and 75 minutes vigorous. And then Neil was really pleased to see that this strength bit's been added, weren't you, in the middle? Because that's links into some of the work you're doing.
Yeah, so we've always done functional fitness, which for anyone who's not clear on that, functional fitness is basically like human movement, the body moving in the planes of motion that we'd move on a daily basis, and maybe just a little bit beyond those sorts of planes of movement. Because then when you meet something like a staircase, if you're stepping up and down on a higher box, for example, than a stair, then walking up the stairs becomes a lot easier, right? And when you look at those guidelines, they're really good in terms of what moderate exercise is and vigorous exercise. But the building strength is the key. Building strength is the unused drug in the NHS. It's the unused cheat code for life. Those things, building strength. So, you know, gym would probably mean more sort of like weight training, resistance-based training, yoga, Pilates, all of these resistance-based workouts. They actually, metabolic health, the internal health of someone is massively affected when you're doing those sorts of workouts, and doing at least 2 of those a week is really important and really ideal. And the reason we need those in there is because of that internal health. Like I say, you know, metabolic disease like diabetes, type 2 diabetes as an example, heart disease, things like that, bone density. As we get older, we decrease. You know, once we're past a certain age, we're actually on the decline. So we need to make sure we look after our bone density and stop the onset of osteoporosis, for example. So, you know, building strength is key, and mixing that in with everything else, the other colors there on that diagram is really important as we get older. But how that can help with your mental health as well, we'll go on to in a minute when we talk about it. But building strength is definitely something we all need to be doing. I would say more than twice a week, but 2 as a minimum.
Yeah. And it's great, like we were saying, the other segments of this are talking about balance as well, which is really important for as we get older, maintaining balance of things and minimizing that sedentary time. So just getting up and moving a little bit more as well is really important. We've got a few things in the chat. So we've got some really good people who are exercising 5 days a week, 2.5 hours session every night.
You know, just even, you know, again, it's something fun. But basketball sessions, just it's about, I think, getting creative with it sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I know my creative one, I guess, in a way. So every Thursday I actually do like pole fitness. So I do that as a session. Again, it's something that I just enjoy. So it actually makes me want to go and do it. Maybe I'm like running, which I'm not such a fan as. If I try and force myself to do that, I just know I may have that feel good factor at the end, but did I really enjoy it? You know, so I think for me, it's all about, making sure you're doing something fun that you know is going to mentally stimulate you to want to do it.
Exactly.
I think the basketball example is a really good one as well, and the pole as well, Becca, because you're doing it. You're doing it probably passively, mentally, if that makes sense. You're not having to. You probably want to go and play basketball. You want to do pole fitness. You're not, like you said, you're not physically having to block out the time to go for a 30-minute run that you don't really want to do. So
that's it.
It's a lot easier. And actually, you know, coming over barriers, which we're going to talk about in a second, that's a great example of it, really. That's the best way to overcome a barrier.
Yeah, it is brilliant. Let's move on. So we've got the benefits of regular movement can improve mental health. So that's the key thing we were talking about. So some of the things that it can do for your mental health here: reduces stress, anxiety, and fatigue, like we said, releases a lot of feel-good chemicals, which we're coming on to talk about. So increases mood, energy, those feel-good hormones that come around, concentration and motivation, and focus and sleep. Sleep is key for our mental health as well. So if we're not sleeping, that has a massive impact. And the way we exercise and the way we move has an impact on sleep. So that's kind of a process in itself. Boosts self-esteem and confidence, and calms the mind from when we're kind of overthinking as well. So that is kind of just to hit all of those benefits of exercise. We tend to think about the physical health benefits, but there's all that mental health stuff in there as well. And if we move on to the next slide, we've got kind of impacts of stress.
Just on that, Claire.
Sorry. Yes, do you want to go back?
Yeah, the sleep, the idea of sleep, and you know, these gadgets that we wear, they're not an exact science, but they are very helpful in terms of data, and they will often report that your sleep is better if you've done a physical activity, planned exercise the day of before that sleep. So physical activity, mental health, sleep, the next day, how you feel, all of those things is a massive holistic approach. It's not just, you know, you got to do physical activity because it's good for your mental health. You do it because then you might sleep better, and because of that, then everything is much more controlled the next day.
Yeah, it's a huge cycle, isn't it? All these things kind of interact with each other. It's so important. We've got a slide, other way, on the impact of stress on the brain and the body. So, you know, it's impacting our brain as well as our body. So we get physical and mental health impacts of stress. And that's the reason for that, is so we take notice of it. It's kind of an evolutionary mechanism, so that we're, you know, when we were cave people and something was going to attack us, our body would decide whether it was going to fight. So it's got the adrenaline, and it's got all of those thoughts and adrenaline within the body to fight. It will freeze, which means, you know, we're trying to hide. We may well get eaten, or we've got flight, which is the ability to kind of run away. So all of that kind of kicks in. But I think moving on to this next slide, these are the impacts of exercise on brain and body. So again, we can wipe out those impacts of stress on the brain and body through exercise, which will do all of these different things here. So linking back to that last slide, increased mood and sleep. We've got the release of serotonin, which is mood boosting. We've got dopamine, which gives us that hit when we're exercising. Endorphins as well, that social connection, but also manages pain. So there's so many benefits that are going on within the brain and the body in relation to exercise there. And physical impacts there: stronger immune system, increasing coordination and motor skills, all these things that are important as we age as well. Healthy joints and muscles, and reducing pain. Neil, I'm sure you wanted to add something to one of these.
Yeah, no, I just want to throw an angle in about the increases movement and flexibility, right?
Yeah.
So let's think about it in an office space, say. As you're sitting down, your hamstrings, for example, are shortening, and they're in that position for a long time, maybe. So then that pulls on your glutes and your hips and your adductors, abductors, and pulls on your lower back, etc. As a result of that, you feel pain if you do that over a long period of time. That pain then has an impact on your mental health and how you feel about yourself and how you feel about your daily movement. So if you are active or do structured exercise, and you can increase the mobility and the flexibility of your body, some of those things that can be a result of sitting in chairs for long periods of time, etc., can be reduced anyway. And that can take away that factor. And something like that, that's so small, just feeling a bit creaky and immobile, can make people feel really under pressure and under tension. No pun intended. But, you know, I think the idea is that from increasing movement and flexibility to the reducing pain there at the bottom, as well as the actual chemical changes, there are both, and they both work for the mind, and they both have long-term effects. And, you know, someone proposed to me the other day that you are either in a state of progression or regression. You're never sitting still. So if you are the opposite to the impact of exercise, so the opposite to these that we see on the screen, that is all going to affect your mental well-being as well, massively.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that we're always moving towards that. And there are many ways we can increase that, which we'll talk about on the next one, I think.
Yeah. I've just noticed in the chat there's a comment there about diet as well, which a question about that, how it kind of interacts. Diet is so important, and we know a lot about how diet impacts the body, but it also has a massive impact on the brain. So our brain needs proteins and nutrients. It needs all of those vitamins, vitamin D from the sun, the B vitamins are very related to mood. So a diet, I think there's some questions in there about how it interacts with both of those, and you're so right, it's so important for interacting with all of this stuff we're talking about. Definitely. Okay. Different way to move. Again, we were talking about what fits in with your routine and what appeals to you. So that is a key thing that's going to overcome some of those barriers to exercise. And it doesn't just have to be, kind of pounding it in the gym or, going to big exercise classes. Any additional movement is going to be beneficial. So walking, digging the garden, moving more around the house. So some people may be at that level where they just need to kind of get up and move a little bit more. We said before, if you haven't got an hour for a gym session, it doesn't matter. Get out and have a sort of 15-minute walk if that's what you've got. So we've got lots of different examples here. Sports. So if you want to kind of do something competitive, you want to exercise with others, that can be, if you're into team sports, that can be really motivating. Active travel as well. So building it into our working day. If we're traveling on the way to work and traveling on the way back or doing something at lunch, we haven't got to get up and get out once we get home. So that again can overcome some of those barriers. We've got a little question there. What appeals to you and fits in with your routine? If you want to pop that in the chat as well.
Walking appeals to me at lunchtime, so I can catch up with colleagues and get some fresh air and get some time away from the screen. And it is like exercise, but it doesn't feel like exercise because obviously you're chatting away and talking about the weekend or what you can do that evening. Stops thinking about work. So that really works for me, and I try and get a walk in every lunchtime if I can.
I think that's a social connection as well, isn't it? That interaction, if you're doing stuff with someone. So Neil runs a running club, and the biggest part for me is about going to that and catching up with everyone and chatting with everyone. Then you don't even think about the running. It's great.
That's it. Yeah, we've had in our Cambridge and Peterborough offices, like they've set up little run clubs now, and it's just nice. I just see people getting together, and it's not necessarily about the running, but just being together and actually enjoying it together.
I think with what Leanne's saying there and the active travel bit, Claire, I think that's if you think of it, there's a newer phrase referred to as NEAT. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which basically implies that you are physically moving, perhaps burning some calories and increasing your heart rate, but without it being any sort of structure to it whatsoever. So for example, you might be in a household where you just decide to go down to one car, and that creates a situation where one of the two parties involved have to then bike to work or walk to work. You've increased your NEAT. So the more you can increase your NEAT. So I now look at hoovering the house as a way of increasing my NEAT. It needs doing anyway. So I can increase my non-exercise activity thermogenesis by just doing some hoovering. Or, I've got to go out to the bin again. Oh, but I'll get an extra few steps. It's all good. Anything like that where you can do something as part of your daily activity and increase your daily activity as part of your actual day is really important. And I think the walking at lunchtime is one of the most underused tools. I think, this idea that you can take your sandwich to your desk and you can have a working lunch. I mean, to be honest, let's bring back the ringing the bell at 12 o'clock and all having an hour off. Let's bring that back. Because actually that would be much better for people's mental health, probably, than some of the ways we work these days. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's all sunshine and rainbows. I can not move from this desk for a long time, and then I kick myself at the end of the day and wonder why I don't feel great at the end of the day mentally.
I love that idea of building it into house, seeing housework in a more positive way, Neil, and getting your steps in.
I always do it when I go to a shop. I park really far away because I'm those extra few steps, there and back as well.
Excellent. Exactly. Getting that meat in there.
Don't they? They say get off the stop before you need, so then you have to walk a little bit further.
It's all going to help. It's all going to be beneficial. this is our barriers slide, which we've come up to. We've spoken about a lot of times, haven't we? So what are our barriers to actually exercising? And a lot of that, Neil and I were talking about this the other day, a lot of it's around lack of motivation. I think if you chat to people, they'll say I haven't got time, but you know, we've got a lot of time in the day if we're using it for the right things, and finances. But looking at that last slide, there are so many things we can do to move exercise where we don't have to spend money. So that's kind of almost an excuse, isn't it? And we've touched on a lot of these already. So if you're working with someone, if you plan to meet someone or you sign up for a class, you've got that social element, you know, you've got that responsibility where you said you'll go. I'm always motivated. I do a yoga class on a Wednesday, and sometimes midweek I'm exhausted. I don't want to go, but I've paid. So definitely for me, the incentive is, okay, I know I'm going to feel better afterwards. I've paid for it. Just get there. And I think when you have a regular class, you don't really think about the fact you're going as well. So building in a regular routine can be helpful. Neil, do you want to add?
I think as well. So what I did is in 2014, I created a running club because I needed a running club and I needed to be around people that were like-minded. What I didn't realize is there's at least 250 other people that didn't have a running club that wanted the same thing as well. And actually of that proportion, I would say the majority of those people are running is why we're there, but it's certainly not what we get out of it. We get a lot more out of it. And that was kind of planning ahead so that I would have a non-negotiable that I had to go and coach every Wednesday. But actually it's not just the non-negotiable, it's the bit where you are going to see like-minded people who want to do what you're doing, but become your friends throughout the process of that. And Claire touched on it about, you know, catching up with people when you get there and whatever. But I think you need to find the thing that is going to remove the middle one of those three. So time, lack of motivation, and finances. I agree with all of those as being massive barriers to exercise, physical activity and movement. But actually the best way to remove the middle one is to find something that you are going to do. And that might be pole fitness or, you know, walking at lunchtime with friends and colleagues, or, you know, as mentioned in the comments, playing basketball. You know, those things, these are the things that are going to win and going to make it happen for you. Because if you don't want to do it, you'll find a way not to. And if you really want to do it, you'll find a way to do it. So try and find the things that are going to facilitate that the most. And that can be for anything. Also the motivational tools bit. I think it's safe to say that data doesn't lie. I think in every industry, data won't lie. Whether that be in sports analysis, whether that be in, you know, sort of retention tools, some of the things that people will be working at in finances, you know, it's the stats won't lie in your industry, and stats don't lie for physical and mental health being linked. You know, if you just did a basic step analysis, I'm sure I didn't find any, Claire. I meant to find some, but I've read studies in the past where people that take less steps a day report that they are in a worse mental state than someone who does at least 10,000 a day, but that's another conversation. But you know, I think there are clear links. So having some sort of way of measuring what you're doing, you know, an hour's basketball session or a hour's pole fitness, whatever it is you're doing, hours yoga, they're really important. But if you've got that data to back it up as well, you will see a correlation. If that data is down, your mental health might be down as well. And I would say it's quite clear to see, for me, over a decade now of doing this industry, you know, 15 years or so, it's very clear when my data is low, my mood is low.
No, it's really interesting, and I think those tools can be really motivating. You know, when we're uploading, you know, if you see that you've only got a few more steps to hit a target, and you get a little smiley or celebration on your device, or we love showing off on social media, like how much we've done. You know, if you link it to Strava, and everyone gives you a bit of kudos every time you get a tick, you get a release of dopamine. So there's like an additional hit to your exercise as well. So those tools can be really helpful. I'm conscious of time, so just going to move on. Next week is the moments for movement. So we want you to think of as a group about how can you find those little moments next week. So if you get a chance to put those in chat. I have a couple of classes. So I have running club that I try to go to, and yoga. But I definitely, the last few weeks, I've been spending too much time at my desk. So I'm definitely going to try and get out before maybe lunchtime, even if it's 15 minutes. That's something I'm going to be doing in the next week. Panel, any other things that you might try next week, or and try and embed a bit long term?
I'm actually on holiday next week, so
I'm going to be relaxing, Leanne.
I'm going to be walking a lot more to the beach, from the beach.
Yeah, you can still build it in.
Yeah, I think definitely I might try and motivate some more people to come on some walks at lunch. I know, to be fair, we're quite good. I know a few of them like to do some, meeting walks or, luncheon walks. So I think
the meeting walk
with the sunshine now as well, it makes it a bit more encouraging, doesn't it, to get outside rather than the cold.
Yeah.
We have actually had a question here. So this is kind of linked, I guess, for all of us. So someone who has been looking for a job for quite a long time, obviously with a lot of time, but couldn't really think about the exercise that they could do alongside continuously sitting in front of the laptop and kind of looking for any opportunities because they don't want to miss any applications. How do they come out of this mentally and undergo these exercises? And I mean, already from reading that, I know it's really important to be taking breaks. A job search is really can be a long process, and it can mentally get you down. So obviously our advice from our end is reach out to us, reach out to agencies, so you've got those specialists to help you. But I guess similar to a desk job, if you're sitting at your laptop for a long time, what would be your kind of few top tips to kind of get them started on that journey of looking after the mental well-being more?
Yeah,
I think if we take that literal question though, not to miss any single application, you probably, if you stay there, you're more likely to miss it. Because getting up and moving is just going to reset the brain. And that doesn't have to be like the structured exercise, like we said. That would be walking out to the end of, down the stairs at the flat that you live in, or to the back of the garden if you've got a garden, or it doesn't have to be long. It just needs to be momentary, just to reset everything. And just that little movement can make a real difference.
And also potentially when they're on the phone, maybe talking to someone about an application or booking in an interview or something, they could be walking whilst they're on the phone and not sitting.
There's research that shows actually if you're standing up while you have a conversation, you sound more assertive actually as well. So kind of standing up and moving around. Building in. There's also the Pomodoro technique, which is where we work for 50 minutes and then we take a break for 10. Or structuring your day so that I'm gonna take a 15-minute walk before I start, and then making sure we're not sat online for a long period of time, because the brain starts to switch off. We can only pay attention for a certain period of time before we're going to start missing things, like Neil said. So it's perhaps a bit of structure, maybe meeting somebody else as well, and just building it into going, getting a cup of tea, get out in the garden, and then perhaps getting outside in the day at some point as well.
We have one guy who's part of our running club, Claire, who always, like in the middle of a class, it will go off. We'll have a 9:30 class till 10:30 every day. And if he's not here, but if he is here, his alarm will go off during the class. And we're like, what's that? And it's in case he doesn't come to the class, he's set an alarm to remind him to move.
Yeah, amazing.
So it's like a movement alarm. Which I appreciate in an office setting might be annoying if there's a phone going off every second with an alarm. But actually, that 50-minute technique, if you do adopt something like that by setting those alarms that you're only going to do X amount of time before you move, it's, And, I always talk about choosing your hard. Being inactive will create hard things later on.
It's hard just to get back, isn't it?
So you choose your hard. Your hard might be, I'm going to choose that it's really hard to get up and go for a 10-minute walk here. But actually that is making your life easier later.
Brilliant.
That's it for questions. I'll say, Claire, let's move on.
No. So just to finish off, we wanted to put kind of support services in there. So with exercise, it can be at different levels. So it may be that we're using exercise to manage our well-being. and keep us well. It may be that we're helping to recover from mental ill health as well. So that's definitely how I used kind of walking when I was recovering from anxiety, or to kind of manage a condition long term as well. And it's okay not to be okay, because just like physical health, sometimes we get unwell. And these are some local and national support services. So the top 4 on the right are local areas with central bits of information. The Hey Cambridgeshire websites have got everything related to mental health, exercise and wellbeing. So there's tons of stuff on there. The others are more mental health related, and the Hub of Hope again lets you search for service by postcode. So some really useful services there. And I think that is the end of our slides.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's it for questions. But, you know, obviously both Claire and Neil are here. They're around, obviously on LinkedIn. So any questions that you have, still pop them on the comments box. We'll be able to answer those after the session. Of course, you've got their contact details on the screen, so you can contact them there as well if you want to DM them privately. But yeah, I will share this one lovely comment that we've had from a viewer, which is they've really enjoyed the session. Thank you. They like to exercise pretty much every day, whether that's running or walking, and they love the idea of NEAT. So there we go. There's one takeaway that everyone can have today. But no, once again, thank you so much, obviously, Claire and Neil, for joining us today. It's been a really, really insightful session, I think, for all of us, including myself and Leanne. And yeah, like I said, if anyone's got any questions, please do pop them in the comments box and we'll keep an eye on them. But apart from that, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.